Cool. And we're broadcasting.
All right. Welcome to everyone. I see we're getting some folks joining us now that it's 2 o'clock. We're going to let people file in for a few minutes. We're expecting a good amount of people today, so we're just gonna let people join. Hello to everybody that's joining. Welcome to the WorkSmart Live, another one in our remote office series. We're just letting people get started. All right, people are coming in. Hello to everyone that's joining. Alrighty. We'll give it one more minute. I see the attendee is populating still, so we'll just give it one more minute. At 2:02, we'll start. Hello to everyone that's joining the call. All right, I said at 2:02 I'd start, so I'm gonna make myself start this on a truth. So welcome to everyone for coming in and signing on to today's webinar. I'd love to do a really quick audio and visual check. So while we're waiting for some other people to come on, so if you can see me and hear me, please type something in the chat box down on the screen. Hello. All right, I see I've got some responses. Super, everyone can hear me and see me. Hello. Great. So welcome to today's WorkSmart Live. I'm Marissa Wayman. I'm the marketing manager here at WorkSmart, and I'm gonna tell you a couple of things about the webinar, and then we'll actually kick it off. So you're gonna hear me introduce myself again, and it's not just because it's Thursday at 2:03. It's intentional. So, all right, couple of tools. So we love to have interactive webinars, and we can do that by using some of the tools here. Because we are in webinar mode, you are muted, but we do have a couple of functions. You've already tested the chat, which is cool. Good to know that it works. There's another tool that I would like you to take a look at. It's the Q&A at the bottom. This is a way for us to ask, for you to ask questions and for us to answer them. We can do that in 2 ways. We can do it live, which is super helpful because Dawn's going to be doing a demo. The other thing that we can do is just answer it in a typed fashion if it's not something that needs to go to everybody. If it's a private chat. But what it does, it allows us to keep track of everything. Chat can get really hard to pay attention to. If you've ever watched any Twitch streamers and you watch their chat feed, it can go kind of fast. So if you do have a question that you'd like us to answer, please use the Q&A section. All right, we will also have a Q&A at the end of the session, but feel free to ask us questions at any time. We will answer them in the moment if it makes sense. We can hold them to the end or if we have a section that's coming up it's better suited at. But just, make sure you ask your questions. And the last thing is, this is a recorded webinar. So you'll get a link tomorrow via email with a recording, and you're welcome to share that with other people inside the office that you think would benefit from this. How to Zoom is probably one of those things that you could share to your team and everyone finds relevant. With that, we're going to go ahead and start the recording. All right, so welcome everyone to today's WorkSmart Live. I'm Marissa Wayman. I'm the marketing manager, and I'd love to introduce you to our co-pilot for today. That's going to be Dawn Church, our WorkSmart events manager. Hey, Dawn, you there? Perfect. All right. So if you're used to joining us for WorkSmart Lives, especially since we've been doing these weekly with the remote office series, you'll notice the roles are kind of reversed. I usually just sit in the background and chime in when I have an opinion, which is a lot. But this, and Dawn usually runs the meeting, but today I'm going to run the meeting for Dawn so that she can show you all the things that she knows about Zoom, which is a lot. with respect to meetings and webinars. So that's why I'm doing a lot of talking to start. Before I talk to you a little bit more about what Dawn's going to do, I want to go ahead and I can thank Dawn for joining us, but she's stuck joining us every week. So I want to thank the Durham Chamber of Commerce for working with us to make this series available to chamber members. We're hoping to reach as many local businesses to help them make the most sense out of their business right now with everything that's going on with working from home. So let's go ahead and jump into why you're all here, which is to hear more about Zoom. With us not being physically present, it's really important to use these video tools to make personal connections. And we believe very strongly in doing what's right and connecting with one another. It's not only important for collaboration, it's good for our mental health. And so in a time when you can be really isolated, these video tools are prime. And so there are lots of tools that are popular. We've got Microsoft Teams and we've got Zoom. We happen to use both tools at WorkSmart. We use Teams for a lot of collaboration, and we use Zooms for meetings and webinars. And so that's where Dawn comes in. She's going to show us some tips and tricks to be productive, but also to keep your meetings secure. And so I could probably talk for another 45 minutes. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Dawn so she can do her thing, and you can learn all about Zoom.
Alrighty. Thanks, Marissa. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And Marissa, can you see a slide deck started? Yeah, cool. All right, yeah. So as Marissa mentioned, I'm WorkSmart's events manager. So I'm inside Zoom practically all day, every day right now, whether I'm working on a webinar like this or doing some social connection opportunities for our team. So today I'm going to show you some of the basic how-tos of the ins and outs of Zoom for businesses. So Zoom is mostly a really simple tool for video conferencing, which I think is what makes it so popular right now, in addition to wanting to be able to see humans in some fashion. But honestly, it can get pretty complicated pretty fast, and I think that's contributed to some of the security issues. So additionally, all of those features are available at every account level. So even if you just have a basic account level, all of those security features and tools and settings that are in 5,000 different places exist, and it can start to make things get really complicated. So I'm going to talk mostly about the everyday basic use how-tos for the remote workplace. I'm not going to get too much into the technical weeds, but I am going to show you those settings because they're something that every single person has to do. So I will highlight some admin capabilities towards the end of this webinar, but for the most part, we're going to keep it pretty high level. So if you have questions as we go along, definitely ask them. And if you have questions about some of the other features of Zoom that are more admin related, definitely ask those as well, because I'll try and answer them if I can. So alrighty, with that, let's talk about what we're going to do. So today we're going to talk about account types. And then I'm also going to go through a how-to for meetings. So we'll talk about scheduling, we'll talk about setup, we'll talk about features. And then we're going to talk about how-to for webinars, because believe it or not, that's actually 2 different platforms within Zoom. I know not a lot of people know that. So we're going to talk about webinars, which is what we're using right now. And then we're going to go over security tips and features. And then we'll talk about some of my favorite virtual event success tips. So I did promise some demos as well. So I will walk you through actually setting up a meeting, and I'm going to walk you through how to do that on the desktop and also the web portal, and show you all these different things because they do exist in a bunch of different places. Then I'll demo some stuff like polls and Q&A recordings, and then we'll go through all of the security features that are within Zoom online. So alrighty, so first things first, let's talk about account types. So this is probably what a lot of people are familiar with right now. This is probably what led to Zoom becoming so popular, is this basic free account that is accessible to absolutely everyone. Basic account is free. And it has this fun little limiter on there, which means you can only have free calls for up to 40 minutes if there are 3 or more guests. Some of the other features are the exact same as what you would get with a paid account, and that's going to look like this. So a paid account starts at the pro level, and the pro level is really great for small teams. The biggest difference between the two is that at the pro level, you don't have that 40-minute limiter, which is really important, especially in a business environment. The pro level also comes with some cloud storage. So if you're recording your meetings, if you're recording your webinars, this is a really important feature for a lot of people. One thing I did want to note is that the basic free accounts that are available right now, if you work in the educational field, you can apply to have those time restrictions temporarily lifted, which is pretty awesome. So some of the other benefits of the pro account is that all of your billing is bundled onto one umbrella. All of the people within that pro account, because you can have multiple different users and the pricing is based on the number of users, they all still have the same scheduling rights, which is really great. It can also make things complicated because everybody has the ability to change up security features. But at the admin level, you can set defaults and you can actually lock down those settings as well, which is pretty cool. Helps you kind of keep everybody in the office secure. And then there's a couple other cool things like reports, and you can designate roles and custom create roles, which is kind of cool and fun as well. And then lastly, on the pro account, you can add on some additional features. So you can add on extra storage and you can add on webinars, because webinars is an extra feature. It's not something that's included in any of the account types, but you do have to have a pro account in order to be able to use webinars. So, alrighty. Okay, so let's talk about higher tiers. I just wanted to mention that there are higher tiers that are available. There's not a big difference, honestly, between the pro and the business and the executive level. Really, the only differences are the number of participants that you can have in a meeting and the amount of cloud storage that's included. And then at some of the higher levels, you can add on some cool marketing and branding features. So like a vanity URL. So instead of zoom.yourwebinar, it'll be worksmart.yourwebinar, which is kind of cool, but you may or may not need it. And then last thing I wanted to note on the account types, absolutely anyone can join a meeting, whether they have a Zoom account or not, which I think is another reason why it's such a popular option for people right now. And I put a little star next to that because there are some cases and there are some settings that you can enable to disable that feature for people to join your meetings. So if you want to lock it down to where people have to have a Zoom account to join your meeting as an extra security feature, you can do that. And then lastly, the setup for meetings and security features are the exact same between the basic and the pro users. So I'm mostly going to be talking today about the pro account and showing the pro account, but all of the setup and all of the security is going to be the exact same. So if you only have a basic account, totally fine. You're going to learn a lot from this webinar. Okay. So let's talk about meetings versus webinars, because we are going to demo both today. So there's different times where you should use different things. Meetings are best for any time that you want an interactive, collaborative, engaging type of experience where all of the people within the meeting can speak and see each other and work on the same things together. So that means this is really great for client meetings and team meetings. You can also, we had this whole webinar last week on personal connections for remote teams. And Zoom is a great option for hosting virtual social gatherings right now, because you have tools like breakout rooms, which are pretty cool. So if you have a large group like we do at WorkSmart, you can break your large group down into smaller groups to have more meaningful connection that way. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight on the benefits of meetings is collaboration. There's some cool tools within the meetings platform, like the breakout rooms, but also whiteboards where you can have people working on the same project board together within the breakout room and then come back to the main meeting room to talk about what they did together. So when you move into webinars, a lot of that collaborative opportunity and shifts away. And webinars are ideal for opportunities where you want to have a broadcast meeting. So a staff meeting, maybe where there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people talking, and you're talking to a large group of people. There are also really great opportunities for stuff like this, so educational webinars. So if you're wanting to do educational webinars for your clients, webinars is a great add-on feature to think about. They're also really good for live streamed events. So if you're wanting to throw something up on Facebook and Twitter and broadcast in a couple of different ways, you can do that through Zoom. It actually has a built-in feature to allow you to send that straight out, which is pretty cool. So the main differences are the active participation that you get from meetings, which can lead to more distraction because I'm sure, as you've noticed, Zoom will, on a meeting, default to the active speaker. So if somebody starts coughing or somebody's dog starts barking, it's going to take away the video from whoever is giving that content to whoever's dog is barking, which makes it a little bit more distracting from the content. However, with webinars, you have the exact opposite. So less distraction from the content, but also less participant participation. So alrighty, so let's move into a demo. So in this demo, I'm going to walk you through scheduling a meeting, and we're going to go through the settings that are within scheduling a meeting. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and give me a second just to switch things over. And I'm going to share in a new way. Alrighty, so you should be able to see my whole desktop. Marissa, are you able to see what I've got here? Marissa?
I see it, yeah. I was
okay.
I was like, I see such a beautiful scene. Why doesn't she care?
Alrighty, so first I'm going to show you how to set up a meeting through the desktop portal. The desktop portal is super convenient, but it doesn't have as many options as the web portal does. So I'm going to walk you through this first. So the cool thing about the desktop portal is I have all of my upcoming meetings here in this nice little bar on the side. And it's super easy to schedule a new meeting. So I can also see past recordings of my own meetings. And I have this thing up here called a personal meeting ID. So a personal meeting ID is sort of like your cell phone number. So at any time, anyone on the internet can call you. And if you happen to have an open meeting going at the time, they will join it. So I really don't recommend that you ever use your personal meeting ID for your meetings. And that reason is because that once somebody has your virtual cell phone number, they can join your meeting at any time. Now, you'll notice all of you are able to see my personal meeting ID right now, which may or may not sound safe, and it really isn't. But the cool thing is with a pro account, you can actually change your personal meeting ID. With a basic account, you cannot. So later on, I will actually go through and I will change my personal meeting ID. That way, nobody has it. Nobody can access me just at random. So, all right. So anytime that you want to set up a meeting, I recommend going here to this plus sign.
Hey,
and
John, we still see the background on your laptop with the window that's for Zoom isn't actually displaying.
Uh-oh. That is good to know. Okay, so let's try this instead. Are you all able to see this now?
It is your background, but that's it.
Okay, so this might be because I'm on Zoom and I'm wondering if it's not allowing me to show what's actively on Zoom, which is kind of a bummer. So I apologize for that, but what I can do is I can switch over to the web portal and I can show you how to set up a meeting there, which is very, very similar. All right, are you able to see this now, Marissa?
Yes, I see Zoom's web portal.
Great, okay. Alrighty, so let's talk about scheduling a meeting within the web portal, because it's very, very, very similar. It's just now you have to go to a website instead of having that on your desktop app. So I apologize to you all that that wasn't something that you're able to see live. I thought that it was, but I'm going to demo some other stuff via screenshots in a little bit anyway, so you'll still see those features. So, all right, so here's how you set up a meeting online. So you're going to click this button right here that says schedule a new meeting. And again, you have the option here that I was talking about to schedule with your personal meeting ID. So again, I really recommend that you don't do that because of the reasons that I said. So when you go to start this new meeting, you can enter in a title. So I'm just going to put test. You can enter in a description, and you can enter in your date and your time. So I'm just going to pick one at random for this demo. The other cool thing is you can set recurring meetings, and it's actually really cool that we are doing this on the web portal because this option is very finicky on the desktop portal. So if you want to schedule a recurring meeting, you just click this box, and you can change a couple of different things to set it for a weekly, and you can do it on multiple different days. You can set it daily, or we can just do no fixed time, and it will not be recurring any longer. You can also change the time zone. Probably not something that a lot of people on this call are going to need to do. And then you can also enable registration. So registration for meetings will mean that you will have to send the meeting link to the people that you want to invite, and they will have to follow through a registration just like you all had to do to get onto this webinar. It's not super necessary for meetings, but it is an option that's there. So for now, I'm just going to disable that. And then you can also enable a meeting password. Zoom shortly will be requiring or defaulting to requiring a meeting password for all of your virtual meetings. This is something that will be, you will have the option to change, but it's going to default to that box being clicked as an extra security feature. So you can change your password to something that you will recognize, or you can let it set to default. And then you can turn on the host and the participants videos to start. One thing that I will note is here with this participant video is that you can turn it off, but your participants will still be able to turn it on within the meeting. So if you don't want people to be able to enable their video, I recommend that you use the webinars. But you can actually, once you have the meeting going, you can lock down all video sharing so that nobody will be able to activate their videos except for the host. I always recommend that you have this, the audio set to telephone and computer audio, because it allows for anybody to be able to access it, whether they are on their phone and in the car, which they probably shouldn't be doing at that time, or if they're on their desktop. And then a couple of different other features that are really important. So you can enable join meeting before host. Don't really recommend that you do that because that's another way for somebody that you might not want to join your meeting to be able to get in there before you're able to stop them. You can mute participants on entry, and then you can enable the waiting room. Enabling the waiting room is a feature that is going to, again, Zoom is defaulting to that box being checked for now. And your waiting room is basically like a virtual box to the side. And I'm actually going to show you what that looks like via screenshot in a little while. But this makes it so that people can't just hop into your meeting without your approval. So if you are going to use that PMI, I really recommend that you always have that enable waiting room box checked. You can also select this authenticated users only option can join. I actually really don't recommend that, and it's not that it doesn't add some extra security, but what it means is that the person has to have a Zoom account in order to be able to join the meeting, and anybody can have a Zoom account. Now I say that with a caveat. Zoom is actually changing that feature a little bit. I don't know what it's going to look like, but there was an announcement a couple of days ago about that they're going to be making some changes to that. So you can touch base with me in about a week or so, and I'll let you know what they've decided to do with it. And then I always record the meeting automatically, and I always record it to the cloud. So the reason why I do that is because if it records to my device, I'm using a lot of storage on my device, and I'd rather it just all be in one nice little convenient list in my Zoom account online. So, all right, last thing is the alternative hosts. Alternative hosts is something that you can set up if you have a pro account or something to the higher tier. And the reason that is because hosts are other people within the same account. So if you have your admin account like we do at WorkSmart, where we have Marissa has her own account, we have a marketing account, service management has an account, we can designate one of those email addresses to be able to start the meeting without us. So all I'm going to do is click save. And now here I have all of this stuff. So if you're doing it on the web portal, it does not automatically populate into your personal calendar. If you're doing this on the desktop portal, we would have gotten a pop-up that would show us, okay, here's this thing just in your Outlook calendar, and it's amazing, and you can add people to your to the meeting right then and there and send the invitation out. Here on the web portal, you have to copy the invitation, just like this. It is now copied to my clipboard, and then take it on over into Outlook. So pretty easy. The cool things about doing this on the web portal is that you can save this meeting as a template. So if this is something that I want to have with all of my settings like preset and ready to go, I've got it here, I can duplicate it, and it's now saved as a template for the future. So, okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second again. And I want to show you this other feature. All right, so now we're seeing, you should see my Outlook calendar. Marissa, can you see my Outlook?
I sure do.
Awesome, okay. So one of the cool things is that Zoom has this handy dandy little plugin for your Outlook calendar. So you can create a new meeting, and I I'm not able to do that right now, so you can click this this button here, this Zoom icon, and schedule a meeting from within your calendar. So it's going to be the exact same. I wanted to show you this just because this is actually exactly what you're going to see on the desktop portal. The options are the exact same. Something to note is that the options within the desktop portal and the options within Outlook are more limited than what you have in the web portal. Within the web portal, you have so many different features, and that's going to be your hub for all of your big settings. These things are going to be a little bit smaller. If you want more control over your settings and your security, use the web portal. And if you want convenience, like here, we can put it straight into our Outlook calendars, use the desktop portal or use your Outlook. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Okay. So I'm not actually going to follow through with sending this meeting, but I just wanted to show you that it was an option. So, alrighty. Marissa, how are we doing on questions so far? Anything?
You are good. One question we do have is related to any known issues with the plugin for Outlook. And I am not aware of any, but I don't support users directly every day. So I don't know that that would be, based on my experience, no, but I'd have to check with our team, see if there's anyone on the call that could speak firsthand from our team. I don't see anyone.
Well, so
I can follow up with you.
Well, so one thing I can say is that for my experience, it is a little bit buggy to use the Outlook plugin. It doesn't work very well for setting up recurring meetings, and it will occasionally crash. Now, I will say, or as you saw just now, the Outlook plugin wasn't available within my Outlook meeting invite specifically. It usually is. I will say that I updated my plugin earlier this morning, so it's possible that there's a bug with an update, and that's why it wasn't there. But it normally is. So, great question. Okay, so
we do have one. Did you see that question that come through?
I saw that there was a thing that flashed, but I haven't really been looking at it. Okay.
Oh, okay. We do have another question. I got it just as you said. That was a good question.
Okay.
If someone has Mac and in Outlook, they don't have the Zoom meeting option like you showed, do you need to install the plugin, and where can you get it?
That's a really great question. My guess is that yes. My guess would be that you would need to reinstall that plugin. And my guess would be that you would need to do that by going to zoom.us. And it should be.
You could, those are all correct. So you can go to, so it is an install plugin. It's not a native Outlook app. So if you go to Zoom, you can either go to the website or you could just go to Google. Actually, I'll send out a link through the chat here in a second. You can install the plugin. You'll log into your account, and then that will show there in Outlook for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Another great question. Okay.
There's other plugins, just so you know, Dawn, this might be something you touch on later in the conversation, but there are plugins that people can use. So like Snapchat. So if you want filters, there are other plugins for Zoom that you can download from their website. The installer or the plugin for Outlook is one of those.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. So just to recap. So when you're setting up a meeting, there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can do that on the desktop app. And again, to highlight, it's good for convenience. It's good because it will auto-populate onto your Outlook if your Outlook is up. It's best for quick and simple meeting setups, but it's not as good for control on your settings. If you want more control on your settings, I highly recommend that you use the web portal. You have more control. You can schedule recurring meetings a little bit better. So this is best for security and features, but it's not as good for simplicity's sake. The other couple things I wanted to touch on, I showed you all that there is the Outlook plugin. We talked about that. It does have the exact same features as a desktop app. The one kind of slight downside is that you can't see all of your Zoom meetings in one place, but you have your whole calendar there, so you can see everything that's happening within your week and life, hopefully, in that one place already, so it doesn't matter quite so much. And then I will also say that there is a mobile app, and you can schedule meetings on the mobile app as well. It's just a smaller screen, so I don't really like to do it very much, but both are completely fine. Alrighty.
We have one more question that came through that I think is relevant. Can you walk through real quick the meeting setup for copying that link that you sent out in the email? Can you just run through that one more time?
Yeah, sure. All right, so let me stop sharing and let me reshare again. Alrighty, so you should be able to see the web portal again, right?
Sure can.
Cool. Alrighty, so here's your web portal. So if you click on this icon right here, meetings, it's going to show you all of your upcoming meetings that you currently have scheduled. So here's our test. And within the test, you can find the invitation. So here it says invite attendees. Oops. This is one other thing I will note right now. Zoom, the web portal, for whatever reason, has been very glitchy for the last couple of days. So I think if I had to guess, I think that that's because Zoom is making so many different changes right now, but I could be wrong, but it's not normally like that. So
that, and they're probably getting, their infrastructure is probably getting attacked by how many people are joining their service.
yeah, 100%.
Microsoft Teams saw some of that interruption as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you want to send that invitation from the web portal, what you would do is you would just click this button that says copy invitation. And you can click this copy meeting invitation blue icon right here, and it automatically copies it to your clipboard. If you'd prefer, you can highlight it and copy as well. So you just
There's
copy.
one more place that you can do that. If you back out of that window and scroll up to the top, a little bit before that, it says add to, and it has those buttons for iCal and Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're using Outlook, if you click on that Outlook calendar, it will actually download the calendar invite itself.
Yep.
And then click on that file, and then it'll open up in your Outlook client, and you'll have all the information already populated there, and you can just go in and add the attendees in the to-line.
Yep, that's also true. I don't personally use that feature quite as much because on a Mac, if you download something like this, at least on my Mac for my personal settings, it will try and populate it into my personal calendar, like my Mac calendar, even though it's an Outlook file. So I'll just, for my personal preference, I always just click copy the invitation if I'm not already within Outlook. But yes, Marissa's 100% right. You can click any of these icons and it will download a file for you.
Easy on Microsoft to Microsoft, it's easy.
Yeah. Mac makes things simple, but also pretty complicated. So yeah, so you would just copy this and then take it over to your Outlook, create a meeting, copy and paste, and then set it up just like you would any other meeting. So this is set for May 11th. So we would need to come over and change the times. So this is what I mean by it's less convenient, but you have a lot more control over what you can do with the settings ahead of time. So that's why those are kind of the differences between the two. There's pros and cons to both. Okay, so I'm going to change my sharing setup. Go back to the slides. Okay, so you can see my slides, right, Marissa?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so that's just the recap on setting up meetings and some of the settings. So, all right, so now that you have your meeting set up, let's talk about what happens within a meeting, because there's settings that exist within a meeting as well. So just to clarify, accessing and starting a meeting is pretty simple. You can do that in a number of different ways. And I'm sure you've all done this plenty of times before, but within that meeting invite that we just showed you on the screen, there was that link. You just click the link to get it started. If you're on the desktop portal, there's a blue button that's next to each meeting that says start. You can just click that as well. Or if you're on the web portal, you can click start from the web portal. So it's pretty easy to get those meetings started. But once you're within the meeting, there's some options for you and your personal tools. So I wanted to show you how to do that. And we're actually going to make it very simple. It's probably the most simple thing within Zoom. So all of your personal settings can be found by clicking one of those two little tiny triangles here at the bottom, and they're going to take you to the exact same thing, even though one is for audio and one is for video. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if you click on this arrow here for audio, you're going to get a bunch of different settings for your audio. You can change your microphone, you can change your speaker, you can test your speaker and microphone, you can switch to a couple different things. If you click on this audio settings, it's going to give you a pop-up, which I'm going to show you in a second. And then same thing here over next to video. If you click the arrow next to video, you got a couple of different things for changing your camera, but you can also click this video settings button here. When you click either of those two things, it's going to take you to here. So you're going to get this pop-up. And within this pop-up is all of the settings that you need for your personal management within a meeting. So here on the general tab, there's a couple of different things. You can use dual monitors, you can enter full screen, you can set reminders, you can ask for confirmation when you leave. If you click on this link down here at the bottom, it's going to take you to the web portal, which has the master list of settings. Your master list of settings is going to have more options, and I'm going to show you what those are later on. So if there's something that you're looking for and you can't find it here, it's going to be in the web portal. So next, if you go down to video, you got all of your options here for video. You can change the ratio, you can enable HD, which I don't really recommend because it's going to slow down performance a little bit. You can flip your video if you like, touch up your appearance if you like, and then there's a couple other things here as well. If you click down to audio, you can do an audio test at any time, which is kind of cool. I really recommend that you do. You can mute your microphone when you join a meeting. You can set this as just a default so you don't have to mute it every single time. There's a couple other things. I really recommend that you just go through these settings and explore. And then you can also look at your screen sharing settings. So your screen sharing settings has a couple of different features here, but we're going to get into more of the nitty-gritty of that when we get to screen sharing. You also have settings for chat. So you can prioritize your unread messages, you can change notification settings, you can play sounds, there's a bunch of different things here. And then virtual backgrounds is something that I know a lot of people are having a lot of fun with right now. So you can use one of the ones that's pre-populated here, or if you click this little plus button, then you can actually add in your own images, you can add in your own videos, you can have a lot of fun with that. If you happen to have it going. So what? Go ahead.
I don't know what you mean. I'm here on the beach.
I know. Let's just all go to the beach. If you happen to have a green screen, which who doesn't have a green screen? If you happen to have a green screen, you can have some fun with that as well, which I don't happen to have a green screen. All right, and then you have some settings for recordings. So it's probably prudent to remind you that you have less settings here in the desktop app than you do on the web portal, which is the case with recordings. So I highly recommend that you handle all your recording settings within the portal at the host level, so you don't have to worry about messing around with these within the meeting itself. But there are some things that you can see here. You can choose where to store it if you are going to store it on a local device. You can record a separate audio file for each participant if that's a thing that you need. You can record videos during screen sharing, which we recommend, just because it makes it a little bit more personal. And then I'm not going to go through these last couple of things, but I want to just note that they're here. You can look at the settings and profile, and all that's really going to do is just take you to the web portal anyway. There's some statistics that are kind of interesting. Feedback just sends feedback to Zoom if you would like. Some keyboard shortcuts. So if you're going to be using Zoom a lot, you can enable some of these shortcuts to like expand out into full screen or mute or unmute. And then accessibility is things like closed captions. So that's
you
it.
can access these settings once you're in the meeting, just like you showed. Mm-hmm. And then you can also access these settings in like the desktop app, the abbreviated version of the settings, I believe, in the desktop app. But the web app is where you get all the details. Is that right?
Yeah, so most of these settings, so you have settings in a couple different places. And this is kind of what I meant by Zoom is really simple, but it gets really complicated really fast. So when you're setting up a meeting, you have some really simplified settings, especially if you're on the desktop app. And those are going to be settings like who can share a video, or how do you want to do a recording? Do you want to record it to a local drive, or do you want to record it to the cloud? Within the meeting itself, you have more opportunity for settings. So settings like chat notifications and chat enabling or disabling chat. Yeah, screen sharing. Screen sharing is not something that you can set up when you are scheduling a meeting. Now, if you want to see all of the settings that are available for screen sharing and recording and security at the big umbrella level, you need to go to the web portal. And I'm going to show you the web portal towards the end of this webinar. So I'm actually going to take you through, here's all of the options that exist. So it kind of does grow in tiers, and it does get a little bit complicated with things being kind of spread out in different ways. So.
And before you move on, can you just go back to the slide with the how to navigate to your personal settings from inside the meeting? The question is, just to show that real quick, Sherry, if you can see this, let me know in the chat that you are seeing this slide so you can choose your settings. And we do have someone noticed, some asked about issues that you could be having with the virtual backgrounds. There are a couple of different things with the images that could be causing issues. Some of them are because if it's trying to isolate without a green screen, so it's looking at your face. But if you upload a picture and it thinks it's a face, see how my hand is making some weird things? It's because it's not smart, it's not advanced enough technology. So that could be some of the issues. I myself have downloaded backgrounds like this Game of Thrones one from Zoom backgrounds, and I haven't run into as many issues. But we ran into that issue when we were creating WorkSmart specific ones. We wanted to have like a black background so that it was easier and more compatible. So hopefully that helps. Also, we had someone ask if Zoom is capable of transcribing meetings.
That's a good question. Yes, it is actually. That's a somewhat new feature, and you can manage that within the web portal. But it is something that you have to set at the web portal level. Not within, at least not at this time that I'm aware of. And I say that because Zoom is changing things all the time. I had to make a change to this presentation yesterday because they changed one of the security settings. So they're updating things pretty fast, which is great. But it definitely means that it makes it a little bit harder to keep track of stuff. So yeah, so going back to where you find personal settings within a meeting, it's very, very simple. All of your settings, again, can be found right here once the meeting has started, right here at the bottom toolbar. This bottom toolbar is always there. If you don't see it, just move your mouse and it's there, it's just hiding. You can click either of these two arrows here at the bottom, and it's going to give you two different pop-ups. If you click the one next to the microphone, it's going to give you some audio settings. But if you click right here where it says audio settings, or if you click right here where it says video settings, you're going to get not this pop-up, you're going to get this pop-up. And this pop-up is a window that holds all of your personal settings within Zoom once the meeting has started. And again, I say that with a teeny tiny grain of salt because there are a couple of things that might not exist there that you need to go to the web portal in order to find. And those are going to be more of your advanced security settings. I do want to go back to this last piece because this is another way that you can kind of manage some of your personal features within a meeting. So within a meeting, you'll see a toolbar at the top. This is the test meeting that I did the other day with my cell phone and myself. So you'll see your own personal video feed at the top. If you look at this, you can see where it says WorkSmart. So if I hover over my video feed, I can see this, these three little blue dots. I can also see the blue icon that says mute. If I click the three little blue dots, I have a couple of different options for things that I can do with my own video. So I can pin it, I can rename myself, I can change my profile picture. I can also, this is not related to me, but I can show non-video participants. So if I want to see phone numbers or people that are dialing in without video, I'll see their name up at the top. And then my husband actually really likes this feature a lot, this hide self view. So we have a family Zoom call every Sunday, and he finds it really distracting to be able to see himself. So he'll hide that self view and not have his video window up. And then lastly, you can change your view settings to gallery or speaker. And it's going to default to whatever the host has. So if the host is in gallery view, it will default the participants to gallery view as well. But if you would prefer to see active speaker view as a participant, you can click that button up at the top and it will change to speaker view for you. So cool. Alrighty, so I'm going to switch over to participant management, and I apologize because we are kind of running pretty tight on time, so I'm going to get through as much of this as I can by 3 o'clock, but I appreciate all the questions that you all have. All right, so participant management. Once you've started a meeting, you're in an active meeting, there's a couple of different ways that you can manage your participants. The first thing is the waiting room. The second is the participant icon in the toolbar. Third is participant's name, and fourth is the security icon in the toolbar. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually. So the waiting room, right now, Zoom defaults your settings to automatically put meeting guests in a waiting room. This allows you to screen your attendees before giving them access. Or if you're using that PMI, this helps you make sure that your guests from your next meeting can't join until you're ready for them to be able to join that meeting. I did say it defaults in the settings to that box being checked, but you do have the ability to uncheck that box. So if it's not something that you want, it doesn't have to be there. But if it's enabled, you're going to have to admit all of your attendees one by one, and it looks like this. So you can access all of your participants by clicking this participant icon at the bottom. And if you click that, it's going to show you a toolbar on the right side of your screen. And that will show you your active participants. So you can see me, I'm already in the meeting as a WorkSmart, and then you can see my cell phone as the person in the waiting room. So if I didn't recognize my cell phone, and because all I can see is my first name and the phone, I can send that person a message before I let them in. So I can find out if they're really somebody that I want in this meeting, or if maybe they're a Zoom bomber and I don't want them to be in this meeting right now. So if I know that they're not somebody I want there, I can click remove. And then if I know there's somebody that I want in that meeting, I can click admit. So this is the first step with every participant if your waiting room is enabled. Cool. Okay. So next thing is that participant icon, which we already kind of talked about a little bit, but it's in your toolbar at the bottom of your screen. It says participants. There's a couple of little people down there and the number of participants in your meeting. Anytime that you want to see your full list of participants and you want to manage things that are happening with them, you click on that participant icon and it's going to give you, again, this pop-out toolbar. The pop-out toolbar will show you all the participants that are in the meeting in a list, and then their status. So you can see WorkSmart's designated as the host. And then my cell phone at this point I had designated as a co-host. And then at the bottom of the participant list, you'll see invite, mute all, unmute, and then this option for more. Within more, there's a couple of different settings that you have there as well. So you can mute participants on entry. You can allow participants to unmute themselves. So if you don't want people to be able to speak at any time, you just unclick that and they won't be able to. You can play enter and exit chimes. You can allow them to rename themselves. If this is a public webinar where you don't know everyone who's going to be in this meeting, I suggest that you don't allow that. Because what that means is that you could have somebody who's joining as John Smith, who you know is somebody at your office who maybe they found that person's name on your website. They can name themselves as that and happen to your meeting that way. So I really don't recommend that you allow them to rename themselves. If you have that enabled, they can make their name whatever they want it to be, whether that's the name that's associated with their account or not. And then lastly, you can lock the meeting. So this is an extra security feature. So if you have all 10 of your guests into that meeting and you're ready to go and you want to make sure, extra sure that nobody else can get in, you'll just lock that meeting. So nice and easy. Okay, so then you can also manage people via their participant name. So within that participant list, there's a list of names. And you can do a couple of different things at the individual participant level by hovering over their name. So if you hover over your guest name, you'll get this little bar that shows up, that shows that blue button to mute or unmute and then that blue button for more. So within more, you can chat them directly. You can force their video to stop. So if they're sharing something that you don't want to be shared, you can force them to stop. You can also elevate their status. So you can make them a host or a co-host. You can rename them yourselves. You can put them in a waiting room, or you can remove them. So if you did attempt to unmute them or mute them, or if you have some sort of audio coming in and you don't really know where it's coming from, you can tell who's muted and who's unmuted by looking at these icons next to their name. If I wasn't hovering over my name right now, then you would be able to see these icons. So if they're red, that means that they're not sharing audio and they're not sharing video. If they're gray, that means that they have both of those things on. If the audio button is missing, or if the video icon is missing, that's because they don't have that as an option. So they might not have joined audio yet, which is something that I have noticed a few times where participants get in and they're not really sure why nobody can hear them. And a lot of times it's because they skipped through joining audio at the beginning somehow. They might have exited out of that screen. So you just have to chat them and tell them that they need to hop out and then hop back in, and it'll give them the new pop-up to, with an option for audio. So that's a good thing to remember. Okay, and then the last thing on participant management within a meeting is the security icon. So the security icon, again, lives in the toolbar at the bottom. So you can click on that screen to do a couple different things. You can also lock the meeting here and enable and disable the waiting room here. And you can allow or disallow participants to share their screen, to chat or not chat, and to rename themselves or not. And you can also remove participants here in this way. So if you have somebody who's an unwelcome guest, you can send them out of the meeting by clicking on that remove participant button. So again, I just want to reiterate, there's a lot of settings within Zoom. If you can't find something and you're in an active meeting, look at that toolbar at the bottom. That toolbar is your home base for all the things that you could possibly need. So that security icon will help you find ways to manage your participants. Participants icon pops everybody out, and then your personal settings live within that audio and video icons to the left of the screen. Okay. So I'm going to drink some water.
While you take a sip of water then, perfect time to answer a question. Someone recently recorded a Zoom meeting, told the attendees how they could change their main view between the camera and the shared screen. And sometimes they were showing a physical object on the camera, but when looked at the recording, it somehow switched what it recorded. And is there a way to control it? Someone told me to use Spotlight Video, but that doesn't seem to work. And I think the answer is if it has to do with cloud recording. If Jerry, if you could type in the chat, if you're using cloud recording, you have to, there's a setting that you have to select for that, correct, Dawn?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure that I'm understanding what you mean by object. So if you want to elaborate that into the chat, then I can probably answer your question a little bit better. But yes, within the web portal, there are a couple of different options for recording settings. If they're not enabled in the web portal, they're not going to show up as options within the meeting itself. So one of those options is to show or to record the active speaker along with the shared screen, or to record a gallery, or to record audio only. So when we get to the recording section, I will make sure to highlight that for you. That way we can, you can see those settings. And again, I apologize, we have, we're definitely at the end of time, but I have a lot more content to go through. If you want to stick around, then I'll show you some other cool things, and if not, we'll send you the recording. But I appreciate all the questions. Cool. So with that, I want to move on to within meetings features. So within a meeting feature, you have a couple of, or within the meeting itself, you have a couple of different features for engagement. The first is chat and reactions. You also have screen sharing, and then you have breakout rooms. So chat looks like this. Again, you're going to access it from the bottom toolbar. If you click on chat, it's going to pop up this participant list again, but it's also going to pop up a chat window underneath the participant list. Chat allows you to chat with everyone or with an individual person only. You can also, if I had multiple hosts within here, you can also select chat to all hosts. The way that you change those things is by clicking on that blue icon and selecting from the drop-down menu of either everyone, all hosts, or the individual participant. If you click on the three dots next to the chat field, you'll see a couple different options that can limit or unlimit the way that people can connect with you during the meeting. So you can change it to participants can chat with no one, so you disable chat entirely, with the host only, or publicly and privately. And you can do that at the everyone level or at the individual person level. You also have reactions. Reactions are really good for meeting participation. So if you are doing a meeting with your team and you want to find out if they have consensus or disconsensus on some sort of topic that you're talking about, you can use those features to get nonverbal feedback from them. Okay, and then you have screen sharing. Screen sharing, as we know, is very helpful for showing content. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that. So as always, you're going to start at that bottom, because we're in an active meeting. We're going to start at that bottom toolbar, and we're going to click this green share screen icon in order to get screen sharing going. Now you can click that arrow next to screen sharing to pop out some settings. So you can change it to only one participant can share at a time, which we generally recommend, or multiple participants can share simultaneously. And then if you click that advanced sharing options button, you're going to get a pop-up like this. So you can change, again, some settings here, and then who can share as well. And then one thing I wanted to note while we're here is, if you'll notice at the bottom, this section is grayed out. And that's because at the account level, the host account level in the web portal, I have disabled the ability for anyone to share while someone else is sharing. If I had not disabled that, this would be an option. But if you ever encounter something within the desktop portal that is grayed out, the reason that that's grayed out is because it's disabled at the account level in the web portal. So you would, if you want that as an option, you have to go into the web portal to change it. All right, so if you click that green icon at the bottom, you're going to get yourself another pop-up. So it's going to default to basic, which allows you to share your entire desktop. You can also share a whiteboard, which is really cool for collaborating on a meeting. A couple of different options. Again, I'm on a Mac, so it gives me a couple different options for my iPhone, and then any active windows that are open. If you click over to the Advanced tab, you'll see a couple of different options as well. I really love this portion of the screen option for screen sharing. I'm actually using it right now, and it allows me to be in presenter mode on my PowerPoint, so I can see all of my notes and my upcoming slides. But you can't see all of those things because I've just drawn a rectangle window around the slide that's active. So that's a really good option. And then last thing, we are not going to go through file sharing, but it is an option that exists here. I don't recommend that you use Zoom for file sharing. I recommend that you use whatever you normally use. So if that's file sharing in OneDrive, or Google Drive, or Dropbox, those are going to be a lot more safer options, especially if you have guests outside of your organization joining this meeting. It's just not super safe to share files that way. Okay, so breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are really great for a lot of different things. They're really great for large team social gatherings because you can put people into smaller groups where they can have more meaningful connections. And then they're also really good for collaboration meetings, because you can take your team and break them down into smaller groups where they can go away and talk about a topic. They can even collaborate on a whiteboard together and then come back to the main room to present the content that they've talked about. So one tip on that is if you want to have your guests utilize a whiteboard in those breakout rooms, you need to designate a co-host for each room to be able to share those whiteboards, unless you have enabled the ability for any participant to share, which we don't really recommend that you do. So this is what it's going to look like. Again, you're going to access breakout rooms from the bottom toolbar. And when you click on the breakout rooms, you're going to get this pop-up window. You can have as many breakout rooms as there are participants, and you can assign them at random, or you can assign them manually. You can allow the participants to return to the main room session at any time, or you can disable that as well. And then there's a couple other things within breakout rooms. So when an active breakout room is going, your hosts are going to have a couple of different options. So as the host, you can, again, assign people at random or manually. You can have as many breakout rooms as there are guests. And then you can broadcast messages. So if you're coming to the end of your time, you can type something into that broadcast and say, hey, you're almost done. And then send that message out into each individual breakout room. You can also join and leave rooms at random. So if you want to go in and have a verbal conversation with people and check on what they're doing, you can do that. And then you can close the rooms to bring everyone back together. And then you can reopen the exact same rooms with the same groups. Or if you want to shuffle them out at random, you can do that as well. Okay, participants. If you're a participant in a breakout room, there's a couple different things. So this is a screenshot from my cell phone. So as you'll see, I've got this little blue icon up in the left corner that says ask for help. So if I'm stuck on something and I need to get the host's attention and they're not in the room, I can click that and it'll send a pop-up to the host. I can also leave the room when I'm done and return to the main room, as long as the host has enabled that as an option. And then participants cannot enter another breakout room unless they are assigned. So you kind of keep everybody nice and neat together. On the note of recordings, if you are recording to the cloud, it's only going to record the main room. So if you want to record the breakout rooms, you need to record to a local device, and then you need to set co-hosts in each breakout room who will record their breakout room to their local device. So it gets a little bit complicated, but it is an option. Alrighty, so last thing on in-meetings features. So you can set, you can manage some recording settings or start recordings within the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can record to the cloud, you can record to this computer. I really recommend that you manage your recording settings within the web portal or ahead of time. But if you do get into a meeting and you want to go through some, or you want to record a couple of things, this is how you do that. Okay, you can also use polling, and you can use annotation, which is sort of like a whiteboard for your host without a board. So if I turned on annotation right now, I could draw just on my screen and you'd be able to see what I'm doing. All right, so again, just to reiterate, if you're not seeing a setting or a feature, it might need to be enabled at the host account level, or it might be disabled at the admin account level. So if you don't see it, you're gonna need to take a look at your web portal, and if it's not there, you're gonna need to talk to your administrator. Okay. So again, to reiterate, there's some differences between meetings and webinars. Meetings are really great for active participation from everyone, but it is more distracting to the content, or can be more distracting to the content if you have a lot of people talking. Webinars are the opposite. And webinars, participants are mostly in a listen and view only mode. The host can allow participants to talk, but you have to do that manually and at an individual level. And participants cannot share their screens and cannot turn on video. So you can also only set this up via the web portal. Alrighty, so I'm gonna stop sharing. Marissa, how are we doing on questions? I think you're muted.
I just asked myself that too. We have no questions right now. We did have some additional conversation around recording. And just to reiterate, that depending on where you record to, if you record to the cloud or if you record locally, the settings are different. So if you want to record the active speaker and a shared screen, that is an intentional box that you have to select. So make sure that you're aware of where you're recording to so that you can make sure that you're recording the correct things.
Correct.
Other than that, what does raise hand do as a participant? That just came through.
It's a good question. Yeah, so what raise hand does as a participant is somebody just raised their hand. So it does exactly that. It notifies the host that either the participant needs something, so somebody can raise their hand and I might not have an idea why, but I can send them a chat message and ask. I can also use that as like a consensus gathering tool, where I can say, okay, if this is relevant to you, raise your hand. So that's what that does. So we get a notification on the host side when somebody raises their hand. Okay, so we're definitely over time. I love that everybody's raising their hands.
I'm having fun lowering everybody's hands. I'm just
Thanks, y'all. All right, so for sake of time, I'm not going to demo setting up a webinar, but I am going to skip ahead and talk about some security tips and features because I know that's really relevant to a lot of people. And then I will take us to the web portal and show some webinar stuff and some other features while we're there. That way, everybody who is on the webinar, we can kind of talk about security tips and features. And then if you are interested in webinar content, then you can hang out a little bit longer. So, alrighty, so let's go back to sharing my screen.
I see it.
All right, cool. All right, so let's talk about security tips. So, number one is you need to treat this like any essential business tool and follow best practices for passwords. There was this article floating around for a little while about all of the passwords that exist on the dark web that are for sale for Zoom. And then people were really freaking out. And yes, that's a thing, but that's a thing that exists for any essential business tool. So if your password gets hacked, if your password is put in somewhere that's unsafe and somebody has it, they can access anything that you're doing within Zoom. And that's the same for any other business tool. So I highly recommend that you follow best practices for passwords. So save those passwords in a protected place, like a password management type thing, and change them often, and don't share them. All right, so next is keep those apps and the plugins up to date. So Zoom is constantly adding new features, especially right now. Keep your apps up to date and your plugin up to date because it helps keep them less hackable, but it also helps you have the newest security features that are available through Zoom. Number 3, never use your PMI for meetings. I know I said that a couple of times, but just don't do it. If somebody has your PMI, it's like your personal cell phone number. So if you have
your personal meeting ID, right?
Yes, personal meeting ID. So never use your personal meeting ID for meetings. Always set up a unique meeting every time. And it's super easy to do that. Instead of letting it be on the button for PMI, you just switch it over to generate automatically and it's going to give you a random number. So always do that. If somebody has your personal meeting ID, they can listen into any meeting that is active. So let's use those unique meeting IDs. Okay, so number 4 is add security controls like passwords, especially to cloud meeting recordings. So you can enable a password at the meeting level and you can enable a password at the webinar level, but you can also set a password on your recordings in the web portal. And I'll show you how to do that in a little while. And then always keep those waiting rooms enabled. If you don't have your meeting waiting room enabled, people can just come on in. So having them in that waiting room gives you an extra level of security because you have to manually admit them.
Prevent Zoom bombing.
Yes, prevent Zoom bombing. All right, so number 6 is disable renaming for attendees and lock your meeting once everybody has arrived. So again, like I said, if you have renaming allowed, then they can go to your website, find out who works there, and just type in that person's name and join your meeting as Joe Schmo who sits next to you. And you're going to think that that's who they are because that's what it says. If you disable renaming, that means that the account has, the name that's associated with the account is what's going to show up in the waiting room. And then lock that meeting once it's started and you've got everybody in there. So I also say to disable rejoin. And again, this is something that you will do in the web portal. So this means once you have removed a participant who was not behaving well, they will not be able to rejoin the meeting. This doesn't mean that if somebody accidentally hops out themselves or their audio gets cut out, that they won't be able to re-enable or to re-enter. It just means that if you've kicked somebody out, they can't get back in. All right, and then if you're going to use a meeting password, disable one-click, which is the setting that we're going to look at in the portal, and send it separately. So one-click is the password is literally included in the URL. So if you're sending that URL to somebody, it doesn't really make sense to have a password. It does in some ways because somebody online can't just dial random numbers to see what they get a hook around. They would have to have the link, but it is less secure. So disable that one click and then send your password separately or send it in a way that's secure. All right, so then disable participant screen sharing. Also disable whiteboard and annotation unless you know everybody who's going to be in that meeting. And then disable file transfer. Again, it's sort of like if you think about phishing emails where there's some sort of malicious link within an email or that downloads something to your device. We don't want to put something into a Zoom meeting or have a participant put something into a Zoom meeting that you then download to your device that has some sort of virus attached to it. So just disable file transfer and send it in however you would normally send it. All right, and then a couple bonus things. So authenticated users features. So this is something that I said when I said I needed to change up my presentation. This is the thing. Authenticated users feature, you can select to not allow somebody who not allow somebody into your meeting that doesn't have a Zoom account. So again, Zoom accounts are completely free. Anybody can have one, so it doesn't really do much. Now, they're changing that to make it a little bit more complicated. There was an option where you could name an email domain and the account associated had to have that email domain. So I could say the authenticated users have to say something at worksmart.com, which is kind of easy to mimic. But they're changing this up. So we'll see where they land. Right now, I don't think it really does much. So you can turn it on if you like, and then the last thing is I highly recommend that you go through the portal settings one by one and do it regularly. So with that, that's actually what we're going to do. So I'm going to stop sharing this way and I'm going to take you over to my portal again. And alrighty, Marissa, can you see my Zoom account?
I see you.
Cool. Alrighty. So I'm just going to go into my account. And if you see over here on the left side of the screen, we have a couple of different things. We have our profile, which is what you're looking at right now. Here's a list of all of the meetings. Here's webinars. Here's recordings, and we're going to come back to that. And then here's settings. So when I have said multiple times throughout this webinar that there are more settings on the web portal than there are within the desktop portal or at the scheduling level, this is what I'm talking about. And this is a site that's available whether you have a basic account or if you have a pro account or higher. So even if you have a basic account, you still have the ability to log into the web portal and see all of these different security setups and features. So I highly recommend that you do this. So it's important that you go through these, I think, one by one, and you can set all sorts of basic things. So here's like, do I want my video to always start or to default as on? I might not, so I don't have it on. Participants, I might not want them to have their video defaulted as on. Audio type, I can set a default, which is what I've done here. And then join before host. I don't want people to join before me because I want to be able to see them in the waiting room and to enable them or to enter them one by one. I also have it defaulted to not use my personal meeting ID when scheduling a meeting. And then same thing for if I want to schedule an instant meeting, which is just, I click a button that says start meeting now. I also have it set to default to not being only authenticated users can join, and that's for the reasons that I said earlier. Same thing from web clients, requiring a password for new meeting scheduling. I actually have that set to off, and that's just because most of the time when I'm setting a meeting, I'm not sending those out to people outside of my organization. It's in my Outlook. It's probably going to Marissa. But there are some cases where I want that on, and I do that on a case-by-case basis. Instant meetings I feel a little bit more strongly about, so I have that there. And then there's a couple other things. So this is what I was saying about disabling the password in the meeting link for one click to join. So this is one that I will always recommend that you have off. Otherwise, if somebody has that link, let's say you put it on Facebook because you want people to join and you haven't enabled registration. Anybody could join that link. That link is out into the world. So that would be a case where you would definitely want to have that off. So again, some additional password things, meeting participants on entry, reminders, and then here's some stuff that's basic within Zoom. So I have chat on, but if I want, I can disable it entirely. I can disable private chats. I have disabled file transfer, as I mentioned. I have this as an option that exists within the meeting just in case something goes wrong. I can enable a survey. I can allow or not allow co-hosts. I have enabled polling because I sometimes do like to use that. And then here we get into screen sharing. So here you can see that I have disabled the screen sharing when somebody else is sharing. And the reason that it's grayed out here at my host account level is because it is disabled and locked at the admin account level as well. Now, this account is not an admin. This account is a user within WorkSmart's account. So if I wanted to change that and let this be an option, I would need to log into the admin account and unlock it as an option, which is possible, but we're not logged into the admin account right now. So there's also disabling screen share. I have disabled annotation for participants because I don't want people that I don't know drawing on my screen. And then same thing for whiteboards. This is sort of an interesting one that I don't entirely understand why it exists, but I can, if I had this enabled, I could give control of my device to somebody else to manage the content that I'm sharing. I don't really want that as a feature, so I have it turned off. So somebody was asking about raising hands. If I had this turned off, things like raising hands and things like yes, no, speed up, slow down, or the smiley face and clap reactions would not be options. Again, here you can see where I've disabled people being able to rejoin and rename themselves. I could, if I wanted to, hide participant profile pictures in a meeting. I haven't, but you could if you wanted to. And then here's where we get into some advanced stuff. So breakout rooms is a feature that you have to enable. That'll be one of those things that if you don't see it, here's where it exists. Remote support, this is something that I could turn on if I wanted to be able to provide technical support to my participants. I am not, I'm the events manager, I'm not a tech person, so I can give some support, but at my account level, I have that turned off because it's not something that I'm super capable of all the time. So somebody asked about closed captioning. So this is a thing, you can turn it on where somebody could manually type them in, or you can have a third-party device that will do it for you automatically. And there is a feature somewhere that will close caption through Zoom, but I believe that that is at the admin account level. So you can disable saving that. And then this is a really important one that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted for everyone today. So this far end camera control, if you have this enabled, this allows another user to take control of your camera during a meeting. I really don't recommend that you have that turned on. It feels very unsafe. So I would recommend that you all hop off of this call and turn that off if it's not already off. And then there's a couple other cool like features and things in here, but these are mostly not about security. So we can talk about them one by one, but what I recommend is that you go through them. Now this last thing is on the waiting room. So I have my waiting room set to always automatically default be on, and then I can choose which participants to put into the waiting room. So the difference between all participants and guest participants is that all guest participants is anyone outside of the admin level account for this particular Zoom setup. In most cases, unless you have Zoom for every single person within your organization, you're going to have a lot of guests unless you give everyone in your office a user account. So I recommend that you put this just to all participants because pretty much everyone is going to be a guest anyway. And then there's some stuff around email notifications. If you're interested, you can go through that. And then some other stuff around email invitations at the bottom. All right, so that's the stuff around security settings. And I also want to notate recordings before we go. So recordings, this is where you set up your overarching umbrella settings for recordings. So here's where you would change how you want your recording to look. So if you want your recording to show with the active speaker and the shared screen, you need to click this icon. If you want the option for gallery view with shared screen, you need to click this icon. And then again down here, if you want a thumbnail of the active speaker within the recording, you need to click this icon. So what that's going to mean is when you come over here to recordings, this is where all of your recordings live. You can click on, these are all of my recordings. You can click on any of these, and because I had those things enabled at the host level, it's going to give me options for these different styles of recordings. So it will automatically give me one for each that's checked. So I have my shared screen with speaker view, and then I have my shared screen with gallery view. I also have audio only. Now what's really cool is I can click this link, and here's my recording, and it's gonna start automatically, so I'm gonna turn that off. But I can also change the playback range. So if you'll notice, a lot of times on these webinars, we start by telling you how to use the tools. Don't necessarily think that somebody who's watching a recording needs to know how to use the tools. So I can come through and I can change, which is what I did on this one. I can change the playback range and save it. This does not alter the original file. It just alters the link that you're sending out, which is great because you can't mess it up. You can't ruin the file level. You've got it here. This is another reason why I really always recommend that you save to the cloud instead of the local device, because it keeps everything there for you. Then when you're ready to share that recording with somebody, you can click here, and let's go back. So you can click this button here that says share, and you're gonna get a pop-up. So there's a couple of different things within the pop-out that you can do. So you can change it to only authenticated users. You can set an expiration. You can change this so people cannot download it. You can also set it so that it requires registration, which might be something that you might want if it's gated content on your website. And you can set a password protection on it. So, which I highly recommend that you do if it's a meeting. You wouldn't want unwelcome guests into your meetings. You probably want your meetings to be private and just to your team. So I highly recommend that you set that password if it's a meeting. If it's something that's educational for all of your clients that exist in the world, you don't need to set that password because you want them to be able to access it pretty easily. Let's go back down to recordings. Oops. I think that's it actually on the recordings. So because I mentioned that I would go through webinars kind of at the end, once I was through all of the security settings, I want to show you webinars real quick. Webinars is the feature that we're using right now. It is an add-on. You have to have a pro account in order to be able to add on webinars to your account. So your scheduling is very similar for webinars, with the exception that you cannot schedule a webinar through the desktop app and you cannot schedule it through your Outlook plugin. You have to schedule it through the website. So to do that, you're going to click schedule webinar, and you can type in a title. You can also use a template, and you can change the times. You can also make it a recurring webinar. You can enable registration, which is something that we do a lot here at WorkSmart. And you can require a password. I don't usually require a password because I've got registration required. And then you can enable video for host and panelist. You can enable Q&A, which I highly recommend that you do. And then enabling a practice session. So practice sessions are what exists before the webinar happens. So if you want to get on and test your audio and visual beforehand and share your screen beforehand, you can enable that practice session to do so before your guests are able to see what you're doing, which I recommend that you do. You can also record the webinar automatically, which I always do. And again, you can set some alternative hosts. And then again, those hosts have to be people that are on the same account as you. So let's give you some insight into what a webinar looks like once you've scheduled it. So this is our webinar for next week. It's called SMB Phone Home. And you can see I have Q&A enabled, I have practice session enabled. And then now that it's scheduled, I have a lot of other options for things that I can do. So I can enable some panelists, and panelists are sort of like your co-hosts or your guest speakers, I should say, your guest speakers for a webinar. They're people who can come on and stand at the podium, but they don't have their fingers on the switchboard. So they can't change the settings. But they can speak to your guests, whereas all the other participants will be in mostly a listen and view only mode. So you can add a panelist by clicking this edit button and then typing in their name and email address, and it will automatically send a notification to them. You can also add some tracking links. So if you want to if you are doing these for educational purposes, you can put them on Facebook, you can put them on landing pages, and you can create registration links for those particular things so you can see where your guests are coming from, which is kind of cool from a marketing perspective. And then additionally, you can, if you come down here and click edit next to the approval area, you've got a couple of different options for registration. So you can set to automatically approve, which I always do. You can ask for notifications for when somebody registers. You can restrict the number of guests. You can close it after a certain date. You can allow or disallow people to join from multiple devices and show a social share option. And then if you click over here, you've got options for questions. So if I wanted some additional information besides their first, last name, and email address, I could select these buttons. And then I can also create my own custom questions, which I don't really do, but you might want to do that. So that's an option there for you. You can also add some email settings. So when you register for these webinars, you get an automated email that has your access information. You can kind of change up the languaging here in the email settings for that. And then you can add some branding. So we always add a banner so that you know what you're signing up for, and our logo. You can also add some speaker information, which is kind of cool. And then you have the option to create some polls. Polls are really fun. They're great tools for people to engage. You can set some stuff around, some settings around Q&A. It's going to default to allowing anonymous questions, which I think you should do. And then it's going to allow questions or attendees to view answered questions only, or some other things in there. And then integration and live streaming. If live streaming is not enabled, this section will be grayed out. And then you can also save this as a template, which is kind of cool. So after a webinar, let's go back to webinars. You can see previous webinars. And I can open any one of these and I can download attendee reports, which is kind of cool. So if I want to see where people came from, if I want to see how many users we had, if I wanted to see how engaged they were, if I wanted to see what questions they asked or their responses to polls, I can find that information here. I'm not going to download this one because that would show you all the email addresses and names of the people who attended that, but I am going to show you a fake one that I pulled earlier. So this is an attendee report. And here on the report, I can see the names and email addresses of everyone that attended. And then I can also see how long they were within a session, which is kind of cool. And then I can see over here in the source column how they signed up for my webinar. So I know where people are visiting, and that's really good information from a marketing perspective. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop share. Marissa, how are we doing on questions?
We have one question for clarification that is related to meetings. So I'll hold that for just a minute to make sure we don't have anyone furiously typing to ask their webinar. The questions coming in, so I'm going to think it's safe. Can you clarify a meeting ID that is given out to participants is different than personal meeting ID, correct?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing so that you can see the difference. So let's go over to meetings. So if I click on schedule a meeting, I have options here on meeting ID to generate automatically or to use my personal meeting ID. So it depends upon what you set the meeting up as. If you set the meeting up as a meeting ID that will generate automatically, yes, that's different from your personal meeting ID. If you set your meeting up to generate with your personal meeting ID, then it's going to be your personal meeting ID. And you can find that information pretty easily by going to your account. So here you can see this is my personal meeting ID, which I mentioned I can change later on because I have a pro account. So if you open up the invitation that you sent to your guests and just check that against your personal meeting ID number, you'll be able to tell if you set it up with a unique ID or a personal ID.
And there is an option to reset that PMI or that personal meeting ID. So if you have given it out and you're not, and now you realize that maybe you didn't want to give it out, you can customize that by going into the web portal settings and then going to your profile and going next, there'll be a spot for personal meeting ID, and then you can just go in there and hit edit, and you can change it to a 10-digit number. And I think there's some other options that you may have mentioned on about like vanity URLs and things like that with some of the elevated accounts.
Yes, but to clarify, you are only able to change your personal meeting ID if you have a pro level account or above. So if you have a free basic account, you cannot change that personal meeting ID.
So it's time to upgrade it and get your PMI updated. You have a free account and you've given it out to a bunch of people, or publicize it on Facebook.
Yes. Yeah. Alrighty. So I had some last couple of things around best tips for best webinars, but we are pretty over time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the slide deck in the email that I send out tomorrow with the recording. If you have any last questions, you're absolutely welcome to ask them now. I am going to share with you some additional upcoming events. So let me get my screen share. Alrighty, so as I mentioned, next week we have a webinar on Nextiva called SMB Phone Home. And we have the week after, we're doing another panel all about cybersecurity for remote offices. So that's going to be a really good one to listen into. And then we have 2 new events that we're really excited about. And those are basic trainings for Office 365. So Marissa is going to be running the content on those. And we're going to kind of drive you through the day in a life from a user's perspective of what a project looks like for collaboration within Office 365 apps. And then the following week, we're going to do the same sort of project, but we're going to show you how to bring it all together in Teams and how Teams can be your hub for collaboration and connection within your business. So
it's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Yeah. And if you can't join any of the sessions live, and you still want the content, you can email me or you can register using the same links and you'll get recordings of those. And Perfect. That's it. I deeply apologize that we went quite over time by a lot. If you have additional questions or if you want to take a deeper dive into Zoom, please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to chat with you on a one-on-one basis about any questions that you might have.
Perfect. All right. Oh, we had one more thing come in. We were cut. It sounded like audio might have cut out. If you do have the basic tier, then you cannot change your PMI. You have to be able to, you have to have a paid account, which is at the pro level. That's one account. So hopefully we answered that question.
Yeah, Marissa, your audio.
I have the name of. We got it. We're good.
Yeah, Marissa, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but your audio is cutting in and out.
That was it. That's the end of the questions. I won't longer.
Alrighty. Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate you hanging out with us today, and definitely feel free to reach out if you have more questions. Bye.
I may be gone.